all tools and technologies that humanity ever invented have one and the same single purpose, and that is to save someone time somewhere. And Bitcoin, to me, is the ultimate tool for time saving. The legal system is not necessarily a lawful system. A lawful system would be that where property rights were always respected. At one point, I left my managerial job and just and did this instead. So that sends a signal to everyone else in that office that that guy just left because he could. The longer you keep your integrity and remain truthful to yourself and to others and provide them with value, the higher the chances that you will get something back from it.
You were sailing before, making music. How did you transition from like that career that's a little bit different to writing about Bitcoin and being an author and speaking about Bitcoin? How did you transition from that to here where you are now with podcasting and writing?
Yeah, I was my sailing career ended when I started a family, and I needed a job that didn't require me to just fuck off for 2 months. I can swear on this pod, right?
Of course, this is.
Yeah.
It's highly recommended.
Fuck yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Christine Lagarde. Anyway, so I got another job with still on boats, but shorter turns. So we did 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and that's what led me into the office of this offshore shipping company, where my last fiat job, I say last instead of latest, but last was as an HR manager for that company. So I did like 8 years on the tall ship, and then 8 years in this wind crew transfer vessel shipping company. The main business of the company was to provide crew transfers out back and forth to wind farms in the Baltic Sea and the North Sea. So and at first I was a captain, just shipping these people out back and forth to the turbines to do reparations or whatever, or some contracts were building contracts and other contracts were, maintenance contracts. And after that, I started in the office, coordinating crews, and later on climbing up the ladders to become a manager. And it was during that time that I wrote in the office when I had a lot to do. I wrote the first book. But before that, when I was at one of the wind farms, I started writing articles because then I had a lot of spare time. Because one job we had was with people who hung from the nozzle and down the wing to inspect the wing of the wind turbine. And that job was just driving them out into the farm or the park, the wind farm, and then dropping them off and mooring to another turbine and just staying standby for 10 hours. And of course, there was some stuff to do with the boat, like checking oil levels and filling in forms and whatever. But when all that was done, it took about half an hour. I had nothing to do for 9.5 hours, so like, or maybe 9 hours. But and I got bored with all the games on my phone, and the internet connection was crap out there at sea anyway. So I decided to start writing articles because I had just taken a course in digital currencies, plural form, online course at the University of Nicosia. I think the course is still there, but it's too shitcoiny. But yeah, so I sort of wanted to find a way to utilize that newfound knowledge of mine, and decided to use it for writing. So I started writing articles, and then they sort of took off. So I decided to write a book. The first book was just a compilation of articles. I didn't really like that because then that's the only book I had to my name. So I decided to write Sovereignty Through Mathematics, which is my first proper book. The rest is sort of history. I went to Riga to the Baltic Honey Badger Conference in 2019 and brought 50 copies of the book, gave them out, and gave out half of them to important Bitcoiners and sold the rest. And then the book sort of took off, and I got invited to pods and invited to do more things. So I did more and more Bitcoin things, and then at one point I wrote an article with a sentence "everything divided by 21 million" in it, and then that sort of became a thing. uh, the infinity divided meme became a thing after the after we made I made a video with Joni Appleberg, the animator, about that, or from that article, and then that visualization of that sentence, this thing on my T-shirt here, that
Yeah.
completely took off, and all of a sudden everyone on Twitter was adding it to their handles, and now I have a folder with a subfolder in it on my computer saying tattoos, and it's the folder is pictures of the equation from around the globe, and the subfolder is tattoos, and it's like around 30 pictures at this point of different people having tattooed the thing into their bodies. So yeah,
Wow.
life took a weird turn. And around when these things happened, I decided at some point to because I could see my fiat career going nowhere since inflation was eating all of the raises I got. So I felt like in that scene in Office Space when he realizes that every day of his life is the worst day of his life because each day is increasingly worse. Well, I wouldn't say that was the case for me, but still, I could see like economically it sort of was because of the inflation eating all of the whenever I got a raise. Still, I had some Bitcoin and I had this thing going, so. At one point, I just decided to quit and move down here to Spain to our holiday home here and do Bitcoin stuff full time. And I'm still trying to figure out what that is. Of course, it includes more writing and doing the pod and yeah, doing this fabulous wine, uh, some other stuff, going to conferences, and I'm just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks and enjoying myself. So yeah, and very happy to be in a position where I can make a living off of just doing whatever I want. That's the
That's
story,
really
I
cool.
guess.
You're the second Bitcoiner who produces wine. I had Ben Justman also on, I think a few weeks ago.
Oh, you did?
That's
Yeah, yeah. I never met him, but yeah, I'm interested in his wine, and I think he's interested in mine too. I mean, I'm not a big wine guy. I got to know a winemaker down here, and
Hmm.
after a while, we figured out that we could collaborate, and maybe if we could brand it with this, that it would be mutually beneficial. So we did, and we tried out different wines and came up with what I think is the perfect blend. It's the best wine I ever tasted in my life, and yeah, for
It
whatever
seems
that's worth. Yeah,
it seems like when you wrote the articles and then you transition also to the books that you were still on a learning journey in Bitcoin, because I guess you used the time for learning and writing the articles. So I guess with the first articles and the book, you learned a lot about Bitcoin, or did you like had
I th-
the
oh I
most important before?
oh I think the learning journey never ends for anyone. I think we're all on a learning journey, and that never stops. Like there's always more stuff to learn. Uh, the rabbit hole is endless. Yeah, of course, I'm learning all the time. Like doing the pod, I learn a lot from just talking to people, like the intricacies of mining, for instance, that I wasn't very informed about before, and there's so much to learn, and not only about Bitcoin, but economics, philosophy, mathematics. This there's so many tangent subjects, so you can always be more knowledgeable. Um, that's the way I
Yeah,
see it.
yeah, that's. I just started. Like, I'm really new to the podcast. Like, it started in November, December. I have now my 54th recording with you, and it's interesting how you have so many different guests on, and you learn from everyone something new that you didn't know
Yeah,
before. And it's like it humbles you every time because you think you studied so many books, you think you studied so many hours of Bitcoin, and then there's a new person coming, and you're like, oh shit, I never thought about that aspect before. And you always learn something new in it.
yeah. One thing I figured out about myself during life, like I'm pushing 50 now. I'm 47, so like if there's any wisdom there, it's like uh, it's this thing how much I enjoy just becoming trying to become better at a certain thing, like so improving a skill. I really enjoy the process of that, and the older you get, the less uh what's the word, you can be embarrassed for not being good enough, so you have too much self-criticism. So too much self-criticism isn't very productive because you never get anywhere. But you have to have self-criticism. Like if you don't, you never get better at anything. So you have to find a balance there, where you want to be on the self-criticism scale. And there was a tip from Trey Parker, the creator of South Park. He said that you should always aim for 95% perfection, because the last 5% aren't going to give you any value, like long-term value. You need to get the stuff out there. If you're 95% happy with it, it's fine. Like nobody else is going to notice the flaws in it. And you could spend 2 more months doing a thing and it would become 5% better. Like the diminishing returns, so
And
aim for 95% perfection, and that's what I try to do. And I think that's why you keep the momentum. And like right now I love trying to be a good interviewer, for instance. Like that's a skill I never had before. I never tried to be an interviewer. I never tried journalism, for lack of a better word, or pretentious blogging, or whatever you call it these days. But it's a good it, but I enjoy trying to be better, because being a better interviewer is just being a better listener, I guess. And I realized a couple of things about myself, that I interrupt too much. Like that's the first thing you notice when you start to do pods, right? Because you can hear yourself interrupting the guest, and like, oh, okay, maybe I should do that a bit less. Uh, so yeah, but as I said, I enjoy trying to get better at stuff. It's up to others to judge if I actually get better at stuff, but still, I enjoy the process.
yeah, this with the interruption, it's interesting because when the guest speaks, and especially if they are like really good in speaking, they usually go on for a longer period of time and making a bigger point. And then there's like so many interesting points in between where you want to like jump in, and you have to be like, let him finish and let this thought finish, and then go on from that. And it was also I struggled a lot with that. I'm still struggling with that, I think.
Yeah,
But
and I think that that's due to a lot of Bitcoiners having some touch of ADD, and you get a thought, and I definitely do. And then as soon as a thought pops into my head, I know I have to act on the thought. Otherwise, I forget whatever was on my mind. So I can be very eager to interrupt people just because I get a thought in my head.
yeah, I have a tactic for that. I have always right here on my screen and sheet open, and when I think it's really interesting, I want to come back to that thought. I just write it quickly down, like 2 words, and it's hard
Yeah,
to do that. But I learned to just write it down, because I 100%, as you said, I forget it 100%. I don't know what I
yeah.
wanted to say.
I couldn't write it down, because that would mean I would lose my train of thought completely if I started writing it down,
Uh,
and I would lose my attention listening to the guest and yeah. So I couldn't do that. I was never good at taking notes.
yeah, it's for me. Unfortunately, it's necessary sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah,
and coming
it
back to
would be good if it could, but yeah, anyway, yeah,
yeah, coming
yeah,
back to the thought that I actually wrote down, where you
yeah,
talked about getting better, and your show is also called like the Freedom Footprint Show.
yeah.
And I think you also mentioned asked that your guests, and I want to give you that question to you also. With getting better and increasing your own freedom footprint, what do you do to increase it, except Bitcoin, like except from the obvious saving your money in Bitcoin and stuff like that? What would you recommend also to other people doing to increase your personal footprint?
Well, it's such a multifaceted question. That's a great question. But what I try to learn about freedom tools in general, and I try to learn how to use them and then use them. So like I'm thinking a lot about like flag theory and stuff. I haven't gotten a second passport yet, but I'm certainly looking into what you can and cannot do when it comes to residency and citizenship and stuff like that, and how to avoid this and how to avoid that, and to try to see the legal system for what it is. Like the legal system is not necessarily a lawful system. A lawful system would be that where property rights were always respected, right? But a legal system, instead of looking at it from the perspective of, oh yeah, I need to obey the law, therefore I do this, you could look at from a consequence analysis perspective, like, okay, I can do this or I can do that, and the consequences are this or that. And regardless of what they call those consequences, what the bureaucrats call those consequences, so you have to, and then you can do a little risk matrix, like, is this good, is this bad, is this worth it, is it worth the trade-off? If I'm, for a simple example would be, okay, I need to go over here from place A to place B, uh, point A to point B really fast, but in doing that I would break the speed limit. So is it worth it? And then you have to ask yourself a couple of questions. Yeah, if I get caught, I have to pay this or that, and I run a risk of losing my driver's license. There's also the risk of it being morally wrong, which is this: if you kill someone accidentally. But if you're confident enough that you won't kill anyone, then nothing should really prevent you from driving as fast as you want, because, like, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else, is not really a crime from a libertarian perspective. So you can do the analysis in your head: is this worth it or not? And that, of course, depends on whatever meeting you're trying to make it to. So in most cases, in this scenario, this is just a scenario I pulled out of my ass, but in most cases, you would probably just drive a little earlier to be on time. That's probably the better trade-off. But like with everything in life, there's always a trade-off, and you can choose to do one thing rather than another. And I just realized that this is a very, very convoluted way to answer the question: how are you increasing your freedom footprint? But um, anyway, I'm thinking about it all the time, and I'm thinking, what can I do, and what is a good idea, and what is a bad idea, and how does it increase? Like, just applying that lens, how does this action increase my long term freedom? Like, how does this benefit me 10 years ahead, 10 years down the line? How does this increase my family's freedom? Yeah.
When we come back to that street example where like when you want to increase your freedom and you're going through the streets faster because you were like, oh, it's my choice and I want to be more free, so I drive with the speed limit I set myself. And then when you run into like, oh, I killed someone because of that wrong action, you still increased your own freedom footprint to a certain extent, I guess. But you decreased the freedom footprint of someone else because maybe that person suffered. It's like
Yes.
increasing your own personal freedom footprint um, uh, always or sometimes decreasing someone else's.
Yes, it reduces the overall freedom dioxide levels of the earth. So that's and that's something you shouldn't do. You should try to maximize all the freedom dioxide levels and not just your own freedom footprint. So that's the ethical standpoint here, I think.
What's the freedom dioxide level?
Well, instead of saying carbon dioxide, I say freedom dioxide as like a
Oh, okay, I
metaphor
guess.
for
Okay, I got
for
it.
for the to prevent global laming. We need to emit more freedom dioxide. That's the thing. So well, the example of the speeding car might be a bad example. This could be like, okay, if I don't pay this tax on time here, I have to pay a fee, or I run at risk at paying a fee. But I know exactly what the fee is, and it might be worth the risk because I might get a return on investment that is, larger than what it cost me to pay the fee. So you can always do this consequence analysis thing when thinking about it. Doesn't have to be limited to a legal framework. It could be anything in life. There's always a trade-off, right? You choose to do one thing, that means you don't do the other thing that you could have done. So like, I think if you do that from a freedom perspective all the time, then I guess that's like the basics of increasing your freedom footprint. And the more I do this stuff, and like, I'm at a position in life now where most of the things I do every day, I do completely voluntarily, and no one's forcing me to do any of this stuff. So of course, I'd like for the numbers to be, for the figures on the balance sheet to be black rather than red, and to make money off of stuff. But it's not the only factor. I just love having the freedom to wake up every morning and be myself and do whatever I want with my time. So that's what I'm striving for, and that's what I'm trying to achieve. Yeah.
It also goes in the section where you try to find truth and truth in yourself, and being true to yourself. Because if you're forced to do something every day you actually don't want to do, you're actually not true to yourself. Of course, you're also not free. Like, you can tackle this from a lot of different angles.
Yeah.
But you're not true to yourself and not true to the environment around you. And you also talked about the transition time from where you had the normal fiat job, and you transition to the, or I go full on Bitcoin, and I guess you're self-employed, having a small company at first, and then trying to do it. I actually go through that myself right now,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I wanted to ask you. And how hard was it for you? What was the experience right in the transition moment where you decided, oh, let's do it? Did you already had like an income source from everything, or did you just go in there and was like, let's try to make it?
Well, I had some savings both in fiat and in Bitcoin. Um, so so I knew that I would be set for bootstrapping the whole thing, and at some point I would get to a sound financial situation, even though that might not have been the case in the beginning. So, and right now I just see it as building these little gardens of these little money making machines every here and there, and also like getting well connected is very underrated still. Like having lots of connections in the space, and seeing what you can do. And I think just providing other people with value will eventually benefit you as well. And also providing other people with value is valuable in itself. It feels very good to help people and to spread a message and to try to be a good person. So there's inherent value in that to me, and I believe that if you do that long enough, and if people see that you're a good guy, and that you value your integrity, and you don't try to run off with a bag of shit coins and scam people, the longer you keep your integrity and remain truthful to yourself and to others, and provide them with value, the 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 higher the chances that you will get something back from it. So I think, like, of course, it's always good to have a bit of a stack, regardless of what that stack consists of. Like, to have something to fall back on before you try jump off the cliff and see if you can fly. um, so that certainly helps. But I think just providing other people with value is a good place to start, and see what happens.
Yeah, I guess also the feedback from the books, and all not only the financial feedback you get from providing value, but I guess there's also a lot of emotional, and a lot of just readers' feedback from your writings, from your books, that you got. Is there anything that's like that stood out to you in the feedback? Is there any like readers' feedback that was really influential, maybe in like a later book, or like a feedback that made you rethink your book or something like that? Anything that stood out to you?
Well, that's not a. I can't think of a big thing like that, but there's lots of smaller tips and tricks and criticisms that I take to heart and try to change. So like, um, when I wrote Everything Divided, I used a editor called Hemingway, I believe, that always suggests shorter sentences. So the sentences are a bit on the short side overall in that book, and someone pointed it out to me. And so therefore, like going forward, and also working with different editors and stuff, it helps my writing a lot to know when to override these suggestions that Grammarly and the similar things give you, so that you don't necessarily have to do what the computer tells you to do. You could do something. You can keep your own voice and your integrity by knowing when to override it. And like so little tips and tricks like that came from different sources. I tried to take it all in and see what I can do with whatever information people give me.
I'm super excited to announce that this podcast got the first ever sponsor. 21 Bitcoin is Bitcoin only from day one, and they teach and preach self custody. This is my go to exchange when someone asks me, oh, where can I buy my Bitcoin from? This is the easiest entry for Bitcoiners. And if you want lower fees, plus at the same time support this podcast, use code Robin and click the link in the description. I mean, I guess it's really, I never wrote a book. Like the longest I wrote was like an article that it's like read 5 to 10 minutes maybe. And even that I did rarely. And I know that I have to start writing more because it's like a thing where you actually learn a lot. I guess people told me that.
Yeah, writing is a time-consuming and tedious process. Even if you use a lot of ChatGPT, it still takes a hell of a lot of time. If you want to be proud of whatever you put out there, you need to like double check everything always, and you need a good editor is very good to have, and uh, but writing is very good for if you want to be better at arguing or debating or getting your point across. Then writing your thoughts down makes your speech more coherent. Like you get better at talking from writing, and vice versa. The more interviews you do and the more you have to express yourself verbally, the better you become at writing. So it's like a self-reinforcing thing. So my writing helps my talking and vice versa.
How do you balance between consuming and producing, like writing and talking and doing the interviews is like producing stuff. You're also
Hmm.
consuming because you listen to the guest, I guess.
Yeah.
But how many podcasts and books, like how much do you balance from like producing versus consuming stuff?
Well, I consume stuff mostly when I drive. So when I'm in the car, I always listen to something. Uh, um, More often than not, when I'm on long walks, which I try to take at least one every day, I almost always listen to something if I'm not in a phone call. So I try to consume. Then again, it's yeah, you have to be picky because you have limited time on your hands. So it is what it is. Sometimes I have to do research for the pod, like I have to listen to something that the guest that is coming on the next day has done, so that I'm not completely unfamiliar with the person. And so, as you know, you have to do some pre-work sometimes, and yeah, and yeah, I spend a lot of time on Twitter and Noster and stuff like that, and especially on Twitter, since it's the bigger platform and I have the bigger following there. Just seeing what people say, and try to have my finger on the pulse of the community, trying to be engaged in the current thing. I mean, the current Bitcoin thing. Um, yeah. So I consume a lot of content as well. I do.
But it can be actually really like finding a right balance. For me, at least, it's really hard to find. Like, oh, how how much can I consume without just consuming the whole day with a podcast and Twitter
Yeah.
scrolling, and then
Yeah.
there's another book coming out, and I should read that also. But there's like a list of 30 books I actually want to read, and there's a podcast coming out, and I want this and that. There's a lot going on, and can be really hectic. But I guess focus is really important.
I guess you have to find what works for you. It's a very individual thing, I think,
Yeah,
and I think everyone's you know writing process and even listening process is different. Like some people need to listen over and over again to a thing, and some people can listen at 5 times the speed and stuff like that. Uh, I can
five
speed up
times.
books. Yeah, yeah, I can't do that. I mean, I can speed up to like 1.5, depending on who's reading the audiobook. I can speed up to like between 125 and 175, but I never do over two because I want the words to sink in a bit. So, yeah, and also depends on if it's in the morning or in the evening. I mean, sometimes you're better at taking in information, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much a morning person.
Yeah. When we come back to Bitcoin and how's the future going, I always wonder if um, the role models in each sector, for example, like for companies, it would be like kind of MicroStrategy to adopting a full Bitcoin standard. For countries, I guess it would be El Salvador with adopting a Bitcoin standard. I mean, there are different examples and there are different variations, and every country and every company is different. Do you see nation state and Bitcoin and companies adopting Bitcoin and individuals taking the Bitcoin standard route, or is it like how do you see it, Bitcoin proceeding the next like 10, 15 years across the different sectors with Bitcoin companies and with nation states?
Very hard to predict the future, but I'm certainly optimistic about it. And I do think there's something to, Bitcoin doesn't go to whenever there's a bull market, Bitcoin doesn't 2x and then pull back. Like Bitcoin 20x's. Like so I think the likelihood of us landing somewhere around $1 million per coin is almost higher than around 100,000. So probably will peak at 1 million and then back to 600,000 or something. That's to me that seems like a more likely scenario than we'll just slowly and steadily go up to 100,000 and nothing happens. Because this FOMOing effects you get from the media paying more attention to it is just enormous, and like there are so many things that are not priced in. So the way I see the Bitcoin price is like the level the thing to look for is the yearly lows and to see where that is trending. And don't worry about the peaks because the peaks are just markets doing market things, uh, and people speculating and then getting scared and selling off. But underlying this ever increasing yearly lows is whenever there's a bull run, a new generation of Bitcoiners is born, and a new generation of hodlers of last resort are born that will never sell. So you're taking all these sats off the market, and at the same time, I don't think most people are not aware that 93% of the Bitcoins that will ever exist have already been mined. So the first 15 years, we mined 93% of the total supply that will ever exist. The following 15 years, we will mine six additional percent. So just the difference between those two numbers, and like the rest, and 100 years from that, it'll be like the last 1%. So sats are extremely scarce, extremely finite, and I think most people just can't wrap their heads around how rare they are. And so you have this finite supply meets unlimited demand at some point, or like what's the upper limit of the demand? It's just how much money people have. but they can potentially throw all the money at Bitcoin at some point. And with each bull run, the likelihood of a hyper Bitcoinization type event happening increases, because you have like, so if I take myself as an example, I used to work in an office where around maybe 50 to 70 people worked, and in a company with 300 employees. And yes, I was known as the Bitcoin guy in the office. Most people didn't want to talk about that very often, and I didn't actively try to push it down their shove it down their throats. But at one point, I left my managerial job and just fucked off and did this instead. So that sends a signal to everyone else in that office that, holy shit, that guy just left because he could. uh, so that's part of the intention. And like, I'm just one guy in one office. This can potentially happen in every office in the world. And it is happening. Like, the stories about people going full time Bitcoin and doing Bitcoin stuff is just everywhere. And like look at the world today as just compared to pre-COVID. Video conferencing was not a big thing pre-COVID. Like, it was more common to give someone a phone call or send an email. Right now, everyone's doing video calls all the time because we had to adapt to that during COVID. But think of how recent that is. So now we can look each other in the eye and have a non-laggy conversation with anyone on Earth at any point, and we can reach anyone we want through social media platforms. And we have Bitcoin, so we have borderless money, borderless communications, borderless everything. So all of the legacy structures are already obsolete. You just either you're living in the future or you're not. A company is nothing more than a Telegram group at this point. You don't need to do all the bureaucracy. You don't even need accounting. You don't need anything like that. You just need an some way to receive and send Bitcoin, and some chat room. That's all a company is now. There's nothing more. There's nothing more to it. Anyone can do anything, and that world is so much better to live in. It's just that most people live in the past and not in the future, or not in right now, which is the future, by the way, because it's the 2000s. So that has always been the future.
I also think that the example of you living the office is a great one. I had a talk on the Spaces on Thursday where we talked about how to best orange pill someone, and we kind of came to the conclusion that the best orange pilling you can possibly do in your personal life is living an amazing life and telling people that you are a Bitcoiner. And
Yeah,
then Bitcoin, and then people are like, he's a Bitcoiner and he has an amazing life. He's just like free. He's doing what he wants to do, and being like yourself and being free and being just happy in life, and people seeing if you're actually happy or just like, yeah, feared,
faking it. Yeah,
sufficient happy. That's, I think, the most effective way to orange pill someone, just being a good person and living a happy
yeah.
life and telling people, yeah, I'm a Bitcoiner.
Actions speak louder than words. That's a thing. Yeah, and which is also why you should. That coin has two sides. You should also look at what people do rather than listen to what they say,
Yeah.
like especially politicians. So so yeah, it's very telling, like what people do.
It's I think so much more telling what people do versus I don't know why I thought about that, but Elon Musk came now to my mind because he talked right now he's not talking about Bitcoin or Dogecoin, anything like that, really rarely, but in the time like 2021 2022 when he talked a lot about Dogecoin, and there were like statistics how much tweets he sent about Bitcoin and how much tweets he sent about Dogecoin, and it was like 10x that number. But he also was on podcast where with Kathy Woods and everybody, and where he was asked, oh, how much Bitcoin, how much Dogecoin do you have? And he did not go into exact numbers, but he basically said so much more Bitcoin than Dogecoin privately, and all his company only bought Bitcoin, never anything else. And
No,
that's
yeah.
also like whereas like see what they're doing. Like he was not he talked only about Dogecoin, but he never went ahead and bought it because he intrinsically most likely knows that it's a shit, or he does not know. I don't know what he thinks, but yeah,
He's
it's
just
there
trolling.
are many
Yeah.
yeah, I guess that's just trolling. There are better examples, I think, to this than Elon Musk,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's a when you look ahead in like the next years, and when we talked about a little bit about the price, what topics are you currently really interested in Bitcoin? Like, what's your current rabbit hole you're learning now about Bitcoin, or maybe also not about Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's interesting. In not about Bitcoin, I'm really deep into, and we've done a couple of episodes about this, about how to which extent the mind creates reality, and how your focus and attention can literally shape your world, and to which extent that is true and not true, and also like debates about free will and time and how that relates to the mind and what we can actually change and not. So I don't really like stuff like that. In Bitcoin, I guess this. I think I shouldn't say ordinals. I should say Ocean Mining is a very interesting company, recently started company, and the whole debate about what to do about the spam. Um, that's a good the people's views on filtering is a good filtering mechanism in itself to a certain extent, because you can see who the bad actors are by just observing what side of that argument they're on. In my opinion, so yeah, that's one rabbit hole. It's kind of an unfortunate rabbit hole, because I wish that this wasn't happening, and that we didn't have to deal with all this bullshit shit coining on Bitcoin. But I suspect there will be more of it in the future. Um, yeah, so in Bitcoin, this whole mining uh, stuff. It's like a little nerdy pet project to study that more and to understand it more, I guess. What else? Um, yeah, they just in general, these other games, like in doing a podcast, there's a lot of other skills that come into that too, and tactics and strategy for the thing. So like how to play the podcast game, how to get YouTube subscribers and whatnot, while still keeping your integrity. So how to select sponsors that you can really that you can trust and that can trust you, and how to navigate this whole game of this whole attention game, like trying to get attention without trying to get attention, I guess. uh, because like you want your ideas and your voice to be heard in the world, so you have to play the if you're in if you're creating content, of course you're not creating it in a vacuum. You want people to hear it or see it, but at the same time you want to keep a very, very high integrity. So you want to be Stanley Kubrick, who got a contract with Warner Brothers when he was around 20 years old. You can do whatever you want with whatever budget you want for the rest of your life. um, and so that's the sort of the situation you want to be in, right? But of course, that's never your exact reality. So you have to adapt to whatever reality you're in. But yeah, it's um, getting your voice heard, but still keeping your integrity. That's a good balance to find, I think, and also like a balance between ego and complete ego dropping. Like to what extent is an ego a good tool, and to what extent is ego completely unnecessary, and to what extent is your ego preventing you from reaching levels you couldn't have reached if you were more egotistical. That's a long and convoluted sentence, but like I like those subjects as well. And most of the times, I think egos just stand in people's ways. Even if your ego is the thing that's telling you to have too much self criticism and be too shy, that's also an ego thing in a way. Uh, it has to do with vanity. Yeah, there are so many things that I'm interested in, and I have a nerdy personality. I go into like the yesterday and this morning I looked at these videos of a mathematical idea that I found interesting, that the sum of all numbers, if they actually go to infinity, is minus 1 divided by 12. Which
What?
is extremely weird. But it's this extremely weird branch of mathematics that so I love these little philosophical mathematics YouTube channels that are out there. So I nerd out on that kind of stuff every now and then as well. So yeah, there's lots and lots of things.
Yeah, with podcasting, I always compare it to Bitcoin itself, actually, because Bitcoin, when you hear Bitcoiners talk about Bitcoin, it's like almost too good to be true. Like the packaging, how they phrase it, and everything is like, wow, that's amazing. And then when you actually do the research and you think hear more about Bitcoin, you're like, that's actually also really true, and it's the value
Yeah.
is also true. And it's, for me, it's like when you have, for example, a YouTube video, the thumbnail and the title and everything, the packaging and the marketing, it has to be good, because otherwise people don't click. And if people don't click, you don't even give them this chance to see what you have
Oh no.
potential as value. But the value also has to keep the promise of everything else.
Exactly. And yeah, more often than not in Bitcoin, I find it like when something sounds too good to be true, and in most cases in the rest of the world that means it's not true, but in Bitcoin it means it's either true or it's even better than you thought it was. Like, so when you start studying it deeper, like it's even better than this preposterously optimistic idea that someone else conveyed.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very true. We are having an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest.
Hmm.
For people that are also really a big fan of the Diary of a CEO podcast, I just stole that end routine from him, and it's an amazing one.
Oh, nice.
The question for you is: imagine you have all the Bitcoin you need in your life. What else
Hmm.
would be important for you?
Time. Like the bitcoins themselves are there to unlock time. That's what they do. All tools and technologies that humanity ever invented have one and the same single purpose, and that is to save someone time somewhere. And Bitcoin to me is the ultimate tool for time saving. So the thing I want more of is not Bitcoin. The thing I want more of is time that I decide over myself, like so that I'm the decision maker. Uh, so yeah, time. I would say time is money. Money is time. So
The,
yes,
the, the- that's very, very true. Yeah. If you had one message you want to give our viewers, what would it be?
one message.
One message, like one thing you want to keep in people's mind.
Uh, get your hands on some bitcoins for fuck's sake.
That's the I think that's the main message of my podcast. Hopefully I do a good job in that.
Yeah, increase your freedom
Perfect.
footprint
Yeah,
and brush
perfect.
your teeth. Yeah.
2 times or 3 times a day.
Yeah,
Uh,
at least once. Yeah.
at least once, perfect. Then thank you, Knut, for being on. For people that want to reach you, I guess you're really findable everywhere, but where's the best way to find you?
On I'm pretty active on Twitter at Knut Svanholm, and I have a website knutsvanholm.com where you can buy wine and books and t-shirts and stuff. And we have the freedomfootprintshow.com or freedomfootprintshow.com. There's no the in there. It's just freedomfootprintshow.com for the pod. So
Perfect.
those are the
Then
best places, I guess. And
thank you
am
for
I
taking.
supposed to ask the next guest a question as well?
Yes, I usually do it offline, but you can also do it now while we still have the podcast on.
Yes, and then the question is, of course, what is the maximum airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
uh, let me see who's the lucky guy who gets the next question. Great. Thank you, Knut, for being on, and hope we can do that again at some point.
My pleasure. Thank you.